In the year 921, a man named Ahmad ibn Fadlan left Baghdad. He was a scholar and diplomat of the Abbasid Caliphate, the most sophisticated civilization on earth at that time. The Caliph had sent him northward as part of an embassy to the Vulgar Bulgars. Along the way, he encountered the Rus, Norse traders who had pushed east along the river networks of Eastern Europe, exchanging furs, slaves, and amber for Islamic silver. Ibn Fadlan watched them with fascination and horror. He recorded their hygiene with disgust, their physical beauty with admiration, and their religious customs with the precision of a man who knew his readers would find them impossible to believe. Then one of their chieftains died. What he witnessed over the following 10 days is the most detailed eyewitness account of a Norse funeral that survives from any source. It is brutal, astonishing, and unbearably vivid. The dead chieftain was placed in a temporary grave while preparations were made. His goods were divided into 3 parts, one for family, one for funeral garments, one for intoxicating drink, which the living consumed for 10 days straight. Then the question was asked of his slave girls, "Who will die with him?" One answered, "I will." From that moment, the girl was never left alone. 2 young women attended her everywhere as she drank and sang for the remaining days. On the 10th day, the ship was drawn up onto the riverbank. A pavilion was erected on the deck. A couch was covered with Byzantine brocade. Then came the figure Ibn Fadlan calls the Angel of Death, an old woman, fat and grim-faced, who took charge of the entire ceremony. The chieftain's body was exhumed, dressed in fine clothes and seated upright inside the pavilion, propped with cushions as though alive. Around him they placed food, drink, and fragrant plants. Then the sacrifices: a dog cut in 2, 2 horses hacked apart, a rooster and a hen, all placed in the ship. The girl went from tent to tent. In each the master had intercourse with her and said, "Tell your lord I have done this out of love for him." She had become a vessel, a bridge between the living and the dead. Then they brought her to a wooden frame like a doorway. Men lifted her 3 times to see over it. The first time she said, "I see my father and mother." The second, "I see all my dead relatives seated." The third, "I see my master in paradise. Paradise is beautiful and green. He calls me. Take me to him." She gave her bracelets to the angel of death, her rings to the angel's daughters. On the ship she drank and sang. She hesitated at the pavilion entrance, caught between worlds. The old woman seized her head and pushed her inside. 6 men entered. Then they laid her beside her master. The angel of death looped a cord around her neck. 2 men pulled. The old woman drove a dagger between her ribs until she was dead. Outside, men beat shields with sticks, so her cries would not frighten other slaves into refusing this duty in the future. The chieftain's closest relative walked naked to the ship with a lit torch and set fire to the wood beneath the hull. Others followed. Within an hour, everything was cinders. A Rus man turned to Ibn Fadlan and laughed. "You Arabs are fools. You put your loved ones in the ground where worms devour them. We burn him in a moment, so he enters paradise at once." This single sentence may be the most revealing statement of Norse death that exists. The fire is not symbolic, it is functional, a technology of transit. The faster the body is destroyed, the faster the dead arrive. But Ibn Fadlan describes only one kind of funeral, the ship cremation of a wealthy chieftain. Most Norse people were buried in simple graves. The range of practice was enormous: cremation and inhumation, flat graves and raised mounds, stone settings shaped like ships, chamber graves lined with wood. The common thread was not the form, but the purpose: equip the dead and send them on their way. And then was Oseberg. In 1904, archaeologists in Vestfold, Norway, uncovered the most lavish Viking burial ever found. Beneath a massive mound lay a ship, 70 feet long, its prow curling into intertwined serpents. Inside were two women, not warriors, not kings. One about 75, the other around 50. They had been buried in 834 CE with carved sledges, a wooden cart, beds, tapestries, kitchen tools, and the remains of 14 horses, an ox, and several dogs. No one knows who they were. The older may have been Queen Asa. The younger may have been a priestess sacrificed to accompany her. DNA shows they were not related. Isotope analysis suggests different origins. The mystery remains. But what Oseberg tells us is this: the most magnificent funerary monument of the entire Viking age was built not for a warrior, but for two women. In a culture portrayed as obsessed with martial glory, the greatest investment of artistry and ritual attention went to females whose names have been lost. This should permanently complicate the popular image. The afterlife was not only about warriors. The funeral was shaped by status, by devotion, by the particular relationship between living and dead. A slave girl on the Volga died so her master would not travel alone. Two women in Vestfold received a ship that rivaled anything built for a king. The dead needed company. The dead needed equipment. The dead needed the living to do their job. And the living needed the dead. Because in the Norse world, the dead did not stay quiet. They came back. They sat up in their graves. They walked the roads at night. The funeral was supposed to settle the dead into their proper place, but sometimes it did not work. Sometimes the dead refused to leave. There is a scene in Njál's saga that has haunted readers for 8 centuries. Two men, Skarphedin and Hogni, are standing outside one evening near the burial mound of Gunnar Hamundarson, a warrior who was killed years earlier. The moon is bright, the clouds come and go, and then the mound opens. Inside, they see 4 lights burning, casting no shadows. Gunnar has turned in his grave to face the moon. He is smiling, and he is singing, so loudly, the saga says, that it could have been heard from much farther away. The two men stand in the cold and listen to a dead man sing to the moon from inside his own grave, and they are not frightened. They are moved. This is a draugr, but not the kind you know from video games. The modern image of the draugr, popularized by Skyrim and a dozen other fantasy franchises, is a rotting, hostile, undead creature that attacks on sight. And this image is not entirely wrong. The sagas are full of dangerous draugr. In Grettis saga, the draugr Glom is a monstrous figure who rides rooftops at night, destroys property, kills livestock, and terrorizes an entire district until the hero Grettir wrestles him into submission. In Irbikja saga, the dead cause plague. In Hrolf's saga Kraka, a sorceress reanimate fallen warriors as draugr who are stronger dead than they were alive. But Gunnar is none of these things. He is peaceful, he is happy, he sings. And his mound is not a prison, it is a home. He lives inside it the way a man lives inside a hall, and the fact that he is dead does not seem to trouble him at all. This duality, the dead as both threat and comfort, both monster and ancestor, is one of the most important features of the Norse relationship with death. The dead were not safely removed to a distant heaven or hell. They were here, in the mound, in the mountain, in the field behind the farm. And their presence could be benevolent or catastrophic, depending on who they were, how they died, and whether the living had fulfilled their obligations properly. The hostile Draugr was typically a person who had been unpleasant in life. Glom in Grettis saga was a surly, antisocial Swedish shepherd. Thorolf Beigifut in Eyrbyggja saga was cruel and quarrelsome. These men did not become monsters because of some supernatural curse. They became monsters because they had always been monstrous. Death simply removed the constraints that society had placed on them. The solution was grimly practical. Dig up the body, cut off the head, burn the remains, and bury the ashes far from the settlement. Even after Christianity arrived, this practice continued. Some things were older than theology. But the benevolent dead were equally real, and their role in Norse society was profound. The dead were not just remembered, they were consulted, they were fed, they were understood to have power over the land, specifically the power to make it fertile or barren. The most striking example is the story of Halfdan the Black, a 9th century Norwegian king whose reign was associated with unusually good harvests. When Halfdan died, the surrounding districts each wanted his body, believing that possession of the dead king would ensure continued prosperity. The solution was to divide his corpse into 4 pieces and bury each piece in a separate mound in a separate region. 4 districts, 4 mounds, 4 quarters of a dead king's body, each one radiating fertility into the soil above. This was not metaphor. The Flateyjarbók adds that people performed bloats, sacrificial rituals, at Halfdan's mounds for years afterwards, and that the practice continued until it was explicitly outlawed. The dead king was not worshipped as a god exactly. He was maintained as a resource. His body, even divided, continued to function, continued to produce, in the same way that a well-tended field produces grain. The Ynglinga saga tells a similar story about Freyr, the god of fertility, who, in Snorri's euhemerized version, is presented as a human king of Sweden. When Freyr died, his followers buried him in a great mound and told the people he was still alive. For 3 years, they continued to bring offerings. When the truth was finally revealed, that Freyr was dead and had been dead all along, the harvests had been so good during those 3 years that the people decided to continue the offerings anyway. The dead king had become more useful than the living one. This is the logic of Norse ancestor worship. The dead are not gone. They are invested. They are underground, but they are working. And as long as the living hold up their end, bringing food, drink, and respect to the mound, the dead will hold up theirs. The practice survived for centuries. In the Orkney Islands, the tradition of leaving food on burial mounds persisted into the 20th century. The being inside the mound was called a hogbun, a word derived from Old Norse haugbui, mound dweller, and it was understood that if you treated your hogbun well, your farm would prosper. If you neglected it, things would go wrong. In Sweden, offerings to elves, beings closely associated with the dead in Norse tradition, continued in rural areas long after Christianization. The names changed, the theology changed, but the practice of feeding the dead in exchange for fertility survived as folk custom for 1,000 years after the last blot was officially performed. Now, consider what happened when Christianity arrived. The conversion of the Norse world was not a single event. It was a slow, uneven, politically driven process that unfolded across 2 centuries, from the baptism of Harald Bluetooth in Denmark around 965 to the final Christianization of Sweden in the late 11th century. It was often imposed from the top down. Kings converted for political advantage, and their subjects followed because they had no choice, not because they had experienced a change of heart. But the theological collision was real, and nowhere was it sharper than on the question of death. Christianity brought 3 revolutionary ideas to the Norse world. The first was the unified soul, the sál, a word that had to be borrowed from Old English because no equivalent existed in Old Norse. Suddenly, the sprawling, multi-part Norse self was compressed into a single, indivisible entity. No more hammer that could shapeshift, no more fulja that could transfer to a grandchild, no more haminga that could be lent to a friend. One soul, one person, one destination. The second idea was moral judgment. In the Norse system, your afterlife destination was determined by how you died. In the Christian system, it was determined by how you lived, and specifically by whether you had accepted Christ. This was a total inversion of the underlying logic. The manner of death became irrelevant. A warrior who died gloriously in battle but had not been baptized went to hell. A farmer who died quietly in bed but had confessed his sins went to heaven. The entire framework of meaning that had organized Norse death, the idea that death itself was a sorting mechanism, was replaced by a framework of moral accountability that sorted you before death based on belief and behavior. The third idea was separation. In Christianity, the dead are gone. They have been judged and dispatched to a realm that the living cannot reach. You can pray for them, but you cannot feed them, visit them, or negotiate with them. The mound is just a mound. The mountain is just a mountain. The dead do not send fertility. They do not sing at night. They do not come to their own funerals dripping wet. This was perhaps the most violent change of all, because it severed a relationship that had structured Norse life for centuries. The living and the dead had been neighbors. Now they were separated by an infinite theological distance. The mound offerings stopped, or went underground, surviving as folk custom precisely because the church could not fully eradicate a habit that was older than any doctrine. And the Draugr? Christianity did not eliminate the restless dead. It reinterpreted them. The dead who walked were no longer understood as haugbuar, mound dwellers with their own agency and personality, but as demons or souls trapped in purgatory or manifestations of the devil. The Norse afterlife did not disappear overnight. It eroded. Piece by piece, door by door, the old system was overwritten. Hell became hell. Valhalla became a pagan curiosity. Folklore was forgotten entirely. Ran sank into folklore. The mountains closed. And the multi-part self, the hamr, the hugur, the fylgja, the hamingja, was compressed into a single soul and filed into a binary system, saved or damned, heaven or hell. But here is the deepest difference, the one that outlasts all the theological details. The Norse system was not about morality, it was about continuity. The point of death was not judgment, it was transition. The dead did not face a reckoning, they relocated. And the living did not mourn and let go, they maintained the connection, feeding the mound, lending the luck, naming the child, listening for the song inside the hill. Christianity replaced this with something cleaner, simpler, and more absolute. One soul, one judgment, one eternity. The mess was tidied, the doors were reduced to two, and the dead, who had been neighbors for thousands of years, were sent very far away. Whether that was a gain or a loss depends on what you think death is for. In 1880, on the island of Rossi in the Orkney archipelago, a farmer named Walter Trail Dennison recorded a belief that his neighbors still held. Every farm, they said, had a hogboon, an invisible presence that lived in the burial mound on the property. If you treated the hogboon well, your cattle would thrive, your crops would grow, your fishing would be lucky. If you neglected it, or worse, disturbed its mound, things would go wrong. Milk would sour, animals would sicken. The hogboon did not forgive easily. The word hogboon comes from Old Norse haugbui, mound dweller, the same word used in the sagas for the dead who lived on inside their graves. In the Orkneys, nearly 900 years after the end of the Viking Age, the fundamental Norse belief that the dead reside in the land, that they have power over its fertility, and that the living must maintain the relationship was still functioning, not as a historical curiosity, not as a folk tale told to amuse children, as daily practice. Farmers left food and drink on mounds. They spoke carefully near them. They understood that the landscape was inhabited by presences that were not alive in the ordinary sense, but were not entirely dead either. The Orkneys are not unique. In Sweden, the tradition of leaving offerings to the tomte, a household spirit closely related to the Norse concept of the ancestral dead, survived into the modern era. In Norway, the Nisse served a similar function. These beings were not gods, not ghosts, not demons. They were the residue of a worldview in which the dead never fully departed, in which the boundary between the living and the dead was not a wall, but a membrane permeable in both directions. And then there is Wayland's smithy. This Neolithic long barrow in Oxfordshire, England, predates the Viking Age by thousands of years, but by the early medieval period it had been absorbed into Germanic legend, attributed to Wayland, the supernatural smith of Norse and Anglo-Saxon mythology. Local tradition held that if you left a horse and a coin at the barrow overnight, the horse would be shod by morning. The dead inside the mound were still providing services. The transaction, offering for benefit, was identical in structure to the Norse mound cult. Different name, different century, same logic. These survivals are not accidents. They persist because the underlying idea that the dead remain in the land and must be respected answers a need that Christianity never fully addressed. The Christian afterlife removes the dead from the landscape. It sends them to heaven or hell, places that are theologically precise, but geographically nowhere. The mound is just dirt. The mountain is just rock. The field where your grandfather is buried has no special power. For communities that lived intimately with the land, farming the same soil, fishing the same waters, burying their dead in the same ground for generations, this removal was a profound loss. The land became empty, the dead became absent, and the living were left alone with their grief and a promise of reunion that could not be verified until they too were dead. The Norse system offered something different: presence. The dead were not absent, they were close. They could be spoken to, bargained with, fed, angered, and appeased. This was not always comforting. The Draugr was a real source of terror, but it was relational. Death was not a severing of all connections. It was a renegotiation. Now, look at what modern culture has done with this material. The dominant image of Norse death in the 21st century is, overwhelmingly, Valhalla. Our cinematic epics and digital landscapes have embedded the Golden Hall into the global imagination. From the silver screen to the worlds of interactive entertainment, the afterlife is reduced to a single destination, the Warrior's Hall. In this narrow focus, the vast, complicated, and contradictory network of Norse death beliefs is effectively erased. This is not just simplification, it is distortion. By making Valhalla the whole story, modern culture repeats the same shift seen in the 13th century. It takes the elite, warrior-centric version of death and presents it as the universal truth. The farmer who went to hell, the woman who joined Freya in Folkvanger, the sailor who sank into the deep, these stories remain invisible. And because they are invisible, the entire worldview they represent, the permeable boundary between the living and the dead, and the land as a dwelling place for the departed, vanishes with them. What has been lost is not just a collection of myths. It is a way of thinking about death that is fundamentally different from the two models that dominate the modern world. The religious model, death as judgment leading to eternal reward or punishment, and the secular model, death as cessation leading to nothing. The Norse offered a third option, death as transition, leading to continued existence in a network of places, some far away and some very close. The dead were not saved or damned. They were not extinguished. They were redistributed. And there is something in this redistribution that resonates with currents in contemporary thought, currents that have nothing to do with Norse revivalism or neo-paganism. Consider the modern ecological concept of nutrient cycling. When an organism dies, its body does not disappear, it decomposes. Its elements are absorbed by the soil, taken up by plants, consumed by animals. The matter that once was a person becomes part of the landscape, literally, physically, measurably. The Norse intuition that the dead remain in the land, that they make it fertile, that their presence can be felt in the soil above the mound, is not mysticism. It is, in a strange and unintended way, ecology. Consider the modern psychological concept of intergenerational inheritance. We now know that trauma, behavioral patterns, and even epigenetic markers can be transmitted across generations. A grandparent's experience can shape a grandchild's biology. The Norse concept of the Hamingja, luck as a personal, inheritable force that flows through a family line, is not a supernatural fantasy. It is, at minimum, a metaphor for something that science is only beginning to map. Consider the modern philosophical debate about what constitutes the self. The Norse view that the self is not a single unified entity, but a collection of semi-autonomous parts, has striking parallels in contemporary cognitive science, which increasingly describes consciousness not as a single phenomenon, but as an emergent property of multiple independent processes. The idea that the self is a confederation rather than a monarchy is not ancient superstition. It is, in certain formulations, cutting-edge neuroscience. None of this means the Norse were secretly modern. They were not ecologists, psychologists, or cognitive scientists. They were farmers, sailors, and warriors living in a harsh environment. And their beliefs about death were shaped by that environment, by the closeness of the sea, the violence of the weather, the visibility of the graves in the landscape, and the unrelenting presence of death in a world without medicine, without central heating, without any guarantee of surviving the next winter. but the structures they build to make sense of death, the multiple destinations, the multi-part self, the permeable boundary, the reciprocal relationship between the living and dead, are structures that still resonate, precisely because they address aspects of death that neither religion nor secularism handles particularly well. The religious model promises meaning but demands faith. The secular model offers honesty but provides no comfort. The Norse model, in its strange and unsystematic way, offered something else: continuity without doctrine. The dead go on. They go to different places. Some of them stay close. And the living continue to tend the relationship, not because a God commands it, but because the dead are family, and family does not end at the grave. This is what the Orkney farmer understood when he left ale on the mound. This is what the Icelandic shepherd understood when he heard the mountain open and the drinking horns ring inside. This is what Ibn Fadlan's Rus companion understood when he laughed and said, "We burn him in a moment so that he enters paradise at once." The dead are not gone. They are traveling. And if you do your part, if you build the fire, load the ship, name the child, feed the mound, they will arrive where they are supposed to go. Today, the Golden Hall still gleams in the popular imagination. Valhalla endures, simplified, commercialized, stripped of its original context as a military draft for a doomed army. But beneath the golden roof, beneath the fame and the franchise deals, the older truth waits. Most of the dead never went to Valhalla. Most of them went somewhere quieter. Most of them went into the ground, or into the sea, or into the mountain. And some of them, if the sagas can be trusted, never left at all. They are still in the mound, still in the land, still listening. And if you know where to look, on a farm in the Orkneys, at a barrow in Oxfordshire, in the silence of a hillside in western Iceland where the light changes at dusk, you might still feel them there. Not as ghosts, not as metaphors, but as the oldest answer to the oldest question. Where do the dead go? Everywhere, and nowhere very far.